Hello everyone! So my name is Justin and I have made videos on my experience at Western Governors University, and I also make videos on the academic journey and different topics related to university life. So this video I'm going to talk about my understanding and experience with competency-based education, which is different than other universities that might be more traditional in their approach. Okay, so first thing we need to understand is that traditional universities, a lot of the time, they are aiming to get you to be a high achiever, right? So, from a young age, we're trained that, the harder we work, the smarter that we are, that we can attain and work towards a high grade. So whether that's like a high percentage, so let's say 90, 100%, or maybe an A grade or within that range. Now, that's useful to some degree, meaning it does motivate many people to work towards higher potential. However, that doesn't necessarily motivate everyone. Not everyone is aiming to be a high achiever. And the question is that necessary? So when you look around the world of work, is everyone always at an A grade or trying to be an A grade student or worker? And the answer in my mind is no. I mean, as somebody who is working in multiple different jobs, even within the teaching field, I can say that there are reasons why, being a perfectionist or trying your absolute best to get the best of the best grade can actually be stifling and can actually result in or eventuate in less than ideal performance. Because if we're always focused on the outcome, meaning we're always focused on having that perfect grade or that perfect outcome, then it's hard to actually understand the process itself. And is that process working for you? So for example, as a teacher, if I'm always focused on making everything perfect and everything as best as it can be, then I lose sight of the fact that there is moments where, we can be spontaneous with our work, and sometimes that spontaneousness doesn't always work out. I might try something in the classroom as a teacher that is just purely for exploratory reasons, but maybe it just doesn't respond well with students, or maybe it just didn't have the outcomes that I was hoping for. But I can learn from that. But again, if I was so focused on, did it work perfectly and why not, and got kind of frustrated by that, then at the end of the day, I wouldn't necessarily feel the need to experiment or try new things, but that's a skill that is actually really useful for development. So if we go back to competency-based education, what we are trying to assess is a competent grade. And they're deeming a B grade as a competent grade. So that means in the world of work, if we had a bunch of B students, we would have a pretty solid work environment. Everyone would be performing their tasks accurately to some degree of excellence, but there might not necessarily be perfection all around, but that's okay. And there may be some high performers and there may be some low performers, but overall, if we're achieving more of that competent grade, we're still actually doing really well in our organization or as a society. That's one ideology, I guess you could say. Some people wouldn't agree with that. They would say, no, we should push ourselves to be higher than a B. Now, even at Western Governors, we work and then we get a pass grade. So there is actually no formal grade. It's not like you're getting an A, B, C, D grade, a 90%, 80%, 70%. It's just pass or fail. And I think where we're at as a culture, we need to start thinking about how that might actually be beneficial to not necessarily have students that are grade driven. Because again, then they become outcomes driven, and that doesn't always work in the real world. Sometimes it's not important to always think about the outcome. And I can say this as being an instructor or a teacher in post-secondary, is when students don't get necessarily a grade that they want, they can get very frustrated at the instructor, as well as they can get very frustrated themselves and push themselves or beat themselves up for not doing better, or project that towards the school, could be the instructor or the institution, about how they don't like it. And it just hinders the whole learning process. But when we eliminate that idea that you have to get a certain grade, a high grade, in order to be considered a good student, then we can kind of sit back and enjoy more of the learning process and actually kind of engage in it with a different perspective. Also, in my experience, I was able to really tap into my prior knowledge. Because I am an instructor and do a lot of curriculum and development tasks already, I was able to basically rely upon the knowledge that I already have and not necessarily have to go back and learn all of the different material on my own and then apply it. So, for example, there were some performance assessments that I did, so certain papers, where I did not read anything that was in the course, but I knew enough that I could actually just do the task, see if I was deemed competent enough, pass, and then move on. In a way, if you are competent enough, why do you have to relearn the material? Because at the end of the day, you're competent enough. Like, you can do that task. So let's learn what we need to learn maybe in a different course and focus our attention there. So what I'm getting at is that this educational system where we have competency-based learning allows for people to come in where they're at, their knowledge is at, challenge the system by saying, I am able to be competent and therefore I don't need to go through and learn all this again, and I can focus my attention elsewhere. So why is this all important? I think at the end of the day, we know that the society that we live in values some sort of credentials and some sort of education. And so for some people, education in the traditional way is very time consuming. It costs a lot of money. It's also ineffective because some of those things aren't going to be very relevant in your life. And there's going to be other things where you just don't want to place a lot of your attention, but you're going to have to go and do these courses from start to finish and all this busy work. But competency-based learning kind of cuts out all that busy work. And particularly institutions like Western Governors, where you're focusing more on the final assessments, like the summative assessments, which are the objective assessments and performance assessments, you're able to just focus your learning. Now, again, I just want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that competency-based learning is good for everyone. I think let's say you are someone who has very limited knowledge in a certain area and you're trying to do something like a master's. Like, that might be really challenging. It's not impossible, but you will have to go through like that traditional process of reading a lot of the material, recalling that information, testing yourself, learning on your own, and then doing the objective assessments. And in some cases, people need more structure for that type of learning, and maybe going into a classroom setting where an instructor will have everything mapped out of how you're going to navigate the learning experience. So you're going to take a test on this month and you're going to learn this subject as a class this month. That might be beneficial for people who do require that structure and primarily kind of beginners in a certain learning area. However, even people who are beginners in a learning area, they may not necessarily want that structure, and then something like competency-based education, where you can be more independent and you can have a lot more autonomy in your learning, may be better suited to your personality type. So not all universities, take advantage of this type of learning, competency-based learning. I would be good to just do a bit of an audit of what are those schools that are doing it in your country. So we know in America, there are, obviously Western Governors is one of those, 𝗀𝗄𝗃 University. There are a few others, but some of those universities, it's more programs within the universities that have kind of a competency-based look and feel as well as an approach. So, it's not as common to find a whole institution based on that. But my assumption is that this will become more and more relevant and more widespread when people start to realize the benefits of competency-based learning. And maybe we come to a place in the culture where credentials and degrees and advanced education won't be as necessary to land certain types of work. And therefore, maybe it won't be necessary to have masters as it is today. And I'm saying that because, it seems like masters is the new bachelor's and bachelor's is the new high school diploma. And so maybe at one point, people won't be as interested in higher education in general. But what I can say is that if you look at a lot of job requirements, there is still that requirement, that expectation that you have some sort of higher education, which could be a diploma, it could be a bachelor's, a master's, and sometimes it's even a doctoral degree. As the way things are, I think this type of education works really well for those that want to get a credential and accelerate the process, because you have that opportunity to learn at a quicker pace if you are self-directed and can manage your time efficiently. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insider view of my interpretation of competency-based education. Hopefully that helps, and I'll see you in the next video.